And blessings of the Almighty God be with all of you. My name is Maryam Shafi, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving you as the Master of Ceremony for this evening. We will begin our program with the recitation of the Holy Quran by Brother Mustafa Farhan. Help me welcome him by the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
ثانية على حب الزهراء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأمين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا. بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
On behalf of his learned scholar, Sheikh Abdul Latif Bedi, Sheikh Dr. Ibrahim Kazarouni, Chairman of the Board, Hajj Kamal Sharada, and the entire IIOK family, we welcome you to our nightly Ramadan English program. Ramadan is like a rare flower that blossoms once a year, and just as you begin to smell its fragrance, it disappears for another year. Therefore, we should make the most out of it by getting closer to Allah and increasing our good deeds. Before I introduce tonight's special guest and renowned scholar, Sheikh Dr. Ibrahim Kazarouni, there are a few program announcements I need to make. We kindly request that you silence your phones and refrain from speaking during the lecture so everyone may benefit from its educational purposes. Tonight's lecture, as well as previous lectures, can be viewed at our website, iiokonline.org. The Islamic Institute of Knowledge will be giving away 3 iPads during our English program. Participation requires individuals to pay close attention and be able to correctly answer questions related to our lecture. The correct answers will then be entered into a drawing at the end of the week for the prize giveaway. Only one drawing per family, please. Following tonight's lecture, we will have a question and answer session. We encourage everyone to participate. Our featured speaker, Sheikh Dr. Ibrahim Kazarouni, is currently a professor at the University of Detroit Mercy, teaching world religions. Sheikh Kazarouni holds a PhD in philosophy, with the concentration in religion and social change. Please help me welcome him to the podium with a loud salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين وصحبه المنتجبين. You could do better than this, Brother Rashid.
ثانية على حب الزهراء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الثالثة بأعلى أصواتكم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Brothers, sisters, colleagues, friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه ولقد خلقنا الإنسان ونعلم ما توسوس به نفسه ونحن أقرب إليه من حبل الوريد. Indeed, we have created man and know of their inner thought, and we are closer to them than their jugular vein. Last night, following the conversation we had the night before, and a number of comments, particularly by the sisters and the QA at the end, I decided to slightly deviate from the traditional lecture style presentation and focus on sharing of ideas, particularly about the youth. Since one of the sisters that sent the email was quite vocal in critiquing the approach, or as Haj Sharara at the end says, the paradigm that is being used. So I thought, well, let's see whether we can change the conversation and share a few ideas that centers on the center itself, what makes it or changes the whole style of presentation that becomes relevant to the youth. After the conversation, I went home and I was searching through a number of researches that were done on this particular issue. There is a book I came across as I was trying to find the research. The book is published by Tufts University. See, when I want it now, the title of the book is Positive Youth Development and Spirituality from Theory to Research. Is it possible to turn this air conditioning on? On is off. This was the compilation of papers presented by over 35 scholars in the field of youth development in Tufts University, and the papers were put together into a book, and that's the title. This is a book review, the person who actually reviewed the book and has made a number of comments. He begins his comment or review with this statement. Motion the word teenager and most people run for cover. Historically in society and academia, youth have been linked with rebellion and seen as either broken or heading in that direction. That doesn't say much about the youth. All the beauty of the youth, their potential, their power, their idealism, it's all gone. What I want to focus upon is the fourth chapter of this book that to a degree relates to what we do. Most of the research that was done here was done primarily by secular scholars, that at best spirituality was taken as some kind of identity independent of religion. Some obscure meaning or linguistic definition given for spirituality. That's not my concern at the moment. But the fourth chapter provides to be one of the most useful ministerial applications. Here, Dr. Pamela E. King, Assistant Professor of the Center for Research and Child Adolescent Development at Fuller Theological Seminary, proposes a practical theology and conceptual model for understanding how spirituality may be a unique and robust catalyst for positive youth development. And then she moves on to define the model that she proposes. It says that King's model depicts three dimensions. The ideological context, which is the religious value given meaning to experience. The social context, integrating the society. And the transcendent context, which is the reality beyond oneself. And particularly she wants to focus, she says it is within the aspect of the transcendence that youth ministries can help their students embrace spirituality and positive youth development by providing opportunities that allow the youth to experience themselves in relation to God. This concept is what we use within our own, if we were to remove the Christian narratives that we have and its application or connotation, it's the issue that we have talked about before. Man arafa nafsah faqad arafa rabbah. Understanding oneself, we can understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's this dynamic relationship between self and Allah that is the cornerstone of the youth, from the Christian perspective, positive youth development. How does that come when it comes to our own community? Nobody can deny that we really have a number of challenges. The verse that I began with, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسَهُ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. It's the outcome of a unique worldview. Those of you who are familiar with the story of creation, I'm sure you have come across the whole detailed analysis that we have in at least 6 or 7 different chapters of Quran, even I think more than 51 verses, from Surah Al-Baqarah to A'raf to Taha to Anbiya and so on. It goes on, but detailed in A'raf and Surah Al-Baqarah. The story explains a number of factors that I want to focus on one of them and link it to this verse, and from there lead to the concept that we are discussing. How do we come up with a unique program that helps the youth positive youth development? There is a huge volume when it comes to the positive youth development, which we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can literally go and read them. The story of creation and Genesis says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from a mixture of clay and Allah's Spirit, created an entity. And this composition, the spiritual component and the material component, became the unique factor once Prophet Adam was asked or told to move from one comfortable position into a totally different position, where he had to go through the challenges of life and become Khalifatullah, the vicegerents of Allah, through struggle. In the first part of the creation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this unique, comfortable environment and told Adam and Eve, that you can roam around and do what you want, but there is one single red line that you should not cross. Once they were prepared to exercise their free will, now however we define that shajara, the tree that Allah prevented them or said prohibited, approaching to them, that's a different story. Once they exercised that free will, the verse in the Holy Quran is clear. Now you have a tension, a life in front of you in which shaitan on one side, you have the two capacities of nafsa ammara and the Spirit of Allah within you. The guidance comes, but remember that shaitan that now understands all your shortcomings. Your sworn enemy is familiar with all your weakness. How do you go about? Now this is the challenge, and you have to deal with it. We provide you with guidance, we provide you with the human intellect. So this human composition has created a unique worldview in Islam, in which Islam rejects any approach. To repeat Sharara's phrase last night, any paradigm that simply gives emphasis to one side against the other. And one of the fundamental problems that we have, that I alluded to it last night, that our society, when it comes to bringing up children, and the youth are one-dimensional, it's one at the expense of the other. We either emphasize on materialism, but then our children, they are self-centered, individualistic, and they want the best material in life, but at the expense of being politically savvy and everything else, spirituality and everything else. We send them to Marrakech religious centers to go through the unique process of learning Quran and everything else, but at the expense of something else again. There is no balance. This kind of approach to creating a one-dimensional stories or one-dimensional approach or paradigm, whatever we call that, or frame of reference, that ultimately deals with the youth is rejected by the Quran. The verse here clearly states, we have created humanity and we understand this creation better than anybody else. Any prescription that comes for the development, whether spiritually, materially, this world or the hereafter, must balance between these two, the spiritual dimension as well as the material dimension. So how do we go about understanding this tension that exists for the youth in particular, when we talk about man arifa nafsa faqad arif? How do we help them to understand who they are and to navigate between who they are, the society that they live, the spirituality and their experience with the divine? This is one of the fundamental challenges of all faith. It's nothing to do with Islam. All faith. If you go through the literature, you see Jewish scholars talking about the same crisis. You see Christian scholars, 39 of them collaborated together to come up with these papers, which collected in one book nearly 400 pages. Nothing else but the youth. The relationship between the youth and the spirituality. How do we bring spirituality into the life of the youth, in which the spirituality plays a positive effect, or has a positive effect in a youth's life? Man arifa nafsa, how do we recognize who are we? Why are we here? What is our role? Is it purely materialistic, or there is another responsibility on our shoulder that we have to discharge? There are a number of hadith with regard to this ma'rifatun nafs, to understand who you are. العارف من عرف نفسه فاعتقه. The true person who understands who she or he is to understand what shackles that individual down and releases and frees that himself or herself, which understand the material dimension that normally we call it nafs ammara or whatever, the nafs or the ego, the dictating ego which shackles one down, has to be broken. And breaking of that is the beginning of the spirituality that we want the youth to focus upon. We tend, as this statement at the beginning of the book talks about, that youth are associated with problem, crisis, unruliness. There is no hope whatsoever. If you want to talk about the youth, you have to talk about nargila or anything else. This image does not depict the true potential and the inherent beauty and innocence that exists within the youth. If our youth, the same manner that others, when you mention youth, they make a run for it, if our youth have reached that point, it's because we have failed to deliver our responsibilities. We inherently created an environment for our youth where they understand nothing but materialism. Spirituality has no meaning for them. So if you bring them up as individualistic, that the only thing that they care about is material life, and struggle to secure the best material life possible, and then you bring them to the center, expect to behave like Salman Farsi, is not going to be. It's a contradiction in nature. There is an expression in Arabic that says, فَاقِدُ الشَّيْء لَا يُعْطِي. If they don't possess it, they can't pretend or they can't even express it. So how do we go about the workshops? The ideas that I presented last night was a conversational beginning, or the beginning of some kind of a discussion that ultimately will lead to some analysis and workshop that ultimately helps the youth in particular. Brother Rashid at the end quoted something. He said that the youth are 50% of the current population, but 100% of our future, the leadership in the future. As soon as we say leadership, well, how on earth are we expecting the youth to become the leaders in the future if there is nothing, no steps taken for the youth to become the leaders of the future? Normally what happens in the past, the flag of one generation is given to the next generation. We have done everything possible, now you can take it and run with it. The youth here are still struggling to understand the tension between their own identity on one side, the identity of the community that they live in it on the other, and the role of the divine or the spiritual role in gluing these two or three dimensions together. Man arifa nafsah faqad arifa rabbah points to this for them to understand who they are. The society as a whole must take the necessary precaution or the necessary step to develop the idea. They then can come and pick up these ideas and move forward and say, okay, where do we go from here in the light of, call it the paradigm shift, or in the light of circumstances change or the context change. Our youth, when it comes to who they are, I had a program on Saturday afternoon for the youth, and the youth identity, they came and presented it, and most of them are university students that they come attend the meeting. I posed one simple question. I said, well, as a Muslim, whether male or female, could you in few sentences or one long sentence tell me how do you define your identity? It was the biggest challenge for them. They have GPOs or something, whatever they call them at the university, of 4 and above, but ask them who you are, they have no answer. If we don't know who we are, if the youth doesn't know who they are, then how do we expect them to stand up to the challenge of that this society, multifaceted challenge that the society provides? Secularism on the one hand, even when analysis is done, if you go and read this book, even when analysis is done, we believe that spirituality is an inherent factor within religiosity. They create an environment that excludes people from the faith orientation, that associate spirituality and faith, or at least they say that there is a direct synthesis between the two. They exclude them, and some bunch of secular academics try to come up with a solution that spirituality, a linguistic term that has no meaning. And what the kids find out, like Madonna or whatever her name is, she goes to the library and buys few CDs. She wants to read or listen to few, saying that she becomes now the expert in Jewish Kabbalah. Our children, when you don't have the base, what do you expect? That's the misconception that exists. The nearest access to spirituality will be a book or some obscure paper at the university or the school, which literally strips it from religion. Once it's stripped, what do you have? Throw Islam out. You can't be spiritual without Islam. You can't be spiritual without Christianity, without the faith itself. You can't be spiritual. I lived in Boulder. There are regular meetings in Boulder in which Jews, Christian, Muslims, and atheists, they all together sit together, say few dhikr, and they call themselves Sufis or Arif. There are fundamental problems that we have to address. And if we don't understand the problem, we cannot provide our youth with the solution. If we don't know who we are, how do we navigate as far as our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our social relationship and responsibilities in life? Then how can we expect our children to behave positively in navigating through the complicated life? I teach at the university, and first night that I have the class, I ask them a number of pertinent questions to understand where they come from. 90% of the time, students that come in from what I call religious background, whether Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism, ask them few pertinent questions that tries to link between their faith that they have been taught, or at least they claim allegiance to, and the crisis that they are supposed to study and find a solution. They have absolutely no clue. As far as they are concerned, the faith is for Saturday morning, for Sunday morning, for Friday morning at the mosque, and outside, nothing. We claim allegiance to a faith that everything within it is political. Even Salat is political, Zakat is political, Hajj is political, Sawm is political. When we, as we say, deconstruct it, it's all done. What is politics? Politics is the art and the science of organizing a community that lives side by side coherently in a balanced way and works for justice. I'm not talking about understanding of politics in the real politics of, say, realist school or something else, or going back to Greek This is the art of politics. Everything that we do in our life has something to do, either development of our own spirituality, or flourishing of our social responsibility, or somehow linking establishment of justice, and so on and so forth. And our children grow up, they have no understanding of what kind of thing is politics. It's just edible, you throw it out, you play with it. They fall victim immediately to this concept, secular, mythical concept of separation of church and state. I have students that are Muslim and they argue with me that politics and religion has to be separated. We really have a challenge. How do we go about organizing a unique structure for the youth that strengthen their understanding of themselves? The hadith that says, bring up your children for a time that you are not going to be around, underlies this factor, that they have to be given the opportunity to navigate through and construct the boundaries for themselves. It's top-down is not going to work. We never give opportunity to our children to create this. So the dynamic relationship between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and understanding that synthesis not only helps us to understand who we are, our children in particular, this is needed more than anything else. Because we lived in an environment, if I came out of the house as a child, say 5 years old, 6 years old, I played on the street in Najaf, barefooted with a plastic ball. If I insulted anyone, the neighbor would grab my ear and say, son, you shouldn't behave like this. It's not allowed. There was a sense of community. Or the wife of the neighbor would tell my mother or my father or my uncle that, look, you have a responsibility towards your children, they are misbehaving. The school was the same thing. They all complemented each other. Now the tension, the external environment pulls away in one direction. كُلٌّ يَجُرُّ النَّارِ إِلَىٰ قُرْصِهِ. External environment pulls the children in one direction. We have a double standard to add to the crisis. We tell our children one thing to go to school or the material life, and there is another one for the center. We want to pull them in another direction, and the educational system pulls them in another direction. These are challenges that must be addressed. And the only place that we can address it is centers like this. But as long as we are able to rethink of the policies that we have vis-a-vis the children. Children have a unique innocence, or the youth, they have a unique innocence that we can utilize. They have power that we can utilize. There is a degree of idealism in their life that we can help. They are thirsty for knowledge that we can provide for them. They can become the greatest asset of the community if we really work for them. So these ideas are not simply wishful thinking. We can stand shoulder to shoulder with those who have been researching in other communities. We really don't need to reinvent the wheels. Work with other experts within the community. It doesn't matter if their narrative is Christian or Jewish or Buddhist. The essence is we can replace the narrative with the Islamic narrative, but the essence is the same. How can we bring spirituality into the life of our youth that provides guidance and strengthen their identity in life, particularly with the challenges that we have? Inshallah, we'll try to follow this whenever the opportunity comes, and hopefully be able to unpack it within the conversation that we have during our QAs. Before I finish, I ask everyone to recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the deceased, the souls of everyone, the deceased, those who are here and who are not here, especially the family of Samahat al-Marja and others. And then, inshallah, we'll open under the guidance of Hajj Kamar Sharara the question and answer. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Thank you, Doctor. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We move on to the Q&A session of our lecture. And Dr. Kazarouni, in a couple of minutes, will ask a question. Actually, I need some help here. If you can help me pass these, please. Yeah. We'll be passing around these pieces of paper with pens. Please write your name and number on the paper with the right answer. Tomorrow is our first drawing. We will select 3 winners, 1 for the iPad and 2 for the gift certificates. While these papers are going around, Dr. Kazarouni, you want to ask a question from tonight's lecture?
I identified in my conversation 3 major challenges for the youth. Name one of them.
3 major challenges for the youth. Name one. 1 out of 3. How many of you remembers the challenges? Two people.
More than that. We have at least
3.
few from the sisters, few from the brothers.
I saw 3 hands.
Now we have 3 or 4 over here, at least 3 or 4 over here.
You want to make it a simpler one?
So let me refresh their memory. I would say one of them. I said the youth have to deal, the youth in our community, they have to deal with 3 issues. One of them was understanding themselves, and 2 other issues.
That's the one that they knew.
Okay, I'll make it even simpler. I said how to deal with the environment, the crisis, the environment, navigate through the environment. There is only one left, so what's the other one?
Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
So that was an interesting topic. I believe that the youth of today have been provided with the institutional structures, but also with the promotion of culture and nepotism. And let's be honest, the youth of today faces the challenge of sectarianism within the United States. I truly believe that there's a generational gap. If you know Sheikh Muhammad Majid, I think he was, although I'm not in agreement with the organization, I think a vice president of ISNA or ICNA or whatever organization, he broke it down into 6 categories to which I tend to agree, and I want your opinion on them. That the youth of today versus the generation of yesterday, there are different objectives and interests, misunderstanding and communication, different values and frame of reference of values, an absence of communication and connection between the generation. This one I find most important, lack of respect towards experience and lack of respect towards potential, as well as a lack of appreciation between generations. Can you comment on that?
Well, if you go to Google and type in why youth run away from churches, a number of research papers have, particularly by Pew Trust in particular, they have done this and they have come up with 6 similar categories in which when youth were asked why they are running away from faith organization or faith centers, most of at least 3 or 4 of what you read sounded familiar to the ones that Pew Trust has come up with, the 6 major issues. You see, the generation gap exists, language, culture, and a few other things. We have not been able to come up with a new style of dealing with our children. We tend to copy the old style that existed in our back home, wherever it was, or how we were treated as a child. If that paradigm becomes the issue, the framework by which we are going to bring up our children, we are going to fail. All of the list becomes the problems that we will not address because we simply do not comprehend. It's a totally different context, different time, different space, and different expectation. So we have the language issue, we have the cultural issue, we have the respect. We fail to understand even the hadith from the Holy Prophet ﷺ that says the first 21 years of your children's life can be divided into 3 different phases. The first phase, education has to be taught through playfulness. The mode of education through playfulness, in which the child, by intrinsically, because of that extra playful energy that they have to expend it, and then the education has to go through it. The second phase is a degree of discipline and guidance, but the third phase in particular is through friendship. And this is during the adolescence, during that most of the children, no matter how you plan for them in advance, this is where they get lost. We are unable to become the friend of our children. Talk to them with respect. We expect respect from them. Yes, your lordship, but we are not prepared to come back. And that concept of love and affection that is supposed to be the glue within the household, not just between the husband and wife, but once children come in, between the entire member of that household, we fail to deliver. Let's be frank. I mean, most of us adults here, we find it difficult to say to our wives, "I love you." We find it difficult to kiss our wife's hand. Didn't the Holy Prophet do the same thing with his wife Khadija? When he walked into the house and Fatima was standing, he would bow in respect to her and kiss her head. There are a number of ethical and moral seerah of the Ahlul Bayt or the Prophet we don't apply to our life. Yes, the Sunnah, we use it in our jurisprudential and theological debate, but the seerah, why did they do what they did? We don't do it. So once love is no longer there, respect is no longer there, added to it to the generation gap, we can't speak their language, they can't speak our language, we don't understand their culture, they don't understand our culture, it's a problem. A brother from Iraq came to me a couple of years ago and he said, "I finally decided that I wanted to go back to Iraq." This is after the occupation had ended, so-called ended. So he decided to take his family back to Iraq. And he said, I just throw in the idea to the family. The first person that stood up and challenged it was my son, who was 15. This is what he said. "Dad, you have sentimental things to remember about wherever that Iraq is. Iraq, for us, is nothing beyond some historical thing that our parents are related to it. What else can we do? The language is not my language. The language is the language of the environment. The history is what the environment teaches. The culture is what environment creates." We failed. So I'm surprised that only 6 were listed. The list should go on, but we shouldn't be despondent. We can work and control the situation. Other people are coming up. All these conferences in universities are to find out the solution to the problem. If we leave it, nothing will be done.
You want to comment back on this? Before you ask the question, can you please repeat the main question for tonight, please, Doctor?
I identified 3 challenges for the youth, and I have told you 2 of them. There's only 1 left. Just identify that challenge.
Yeah, go ahead.
Salam, Sheikh. A lot of great scholars encourage the youth to get married at a young age, right? But nowadays, we need at least a bachelor's to have a satisfying job. Okay, and then if we jump into marriage, what's the possibilities of us getting a wife that we actually plan to stand to live with the rest of our lives?
Well, I believe the question has a number of issues that have to be dealt with separately. First of all, I would contest that anybody needs a bachelor degree to be able to get married or have a successful life. Yeah. Successful life partnership is based on what we call kufr, which how close your intellect is to the possible partner. If you can find somebody who is intellectually close to your way of thinking, whether you have a job or you don't have a job, you can live together in a happily way of life, as long as you discharge your responsibility of creating a marriage or the family structure that satisfies these 3 conditions. Number 1, both partners respect each other and claim that the parity concept. Number 2, it is based on love and affection. And number 3, the house environment becomes the place for tranquility and peace for both of them. That's one issue separately. Even if you have, say, bachelor degree, masters, or 600 PhDs, if mindset are not close, it's not going to work. The other issue, whether under the current context and environment, marrying at the young age is going to be beneficial or not, that is debatable. Because what we need for a successful relationship is for both parties to understand their rights, their responsibilities, and to be able to shoulder those responsibilities successfully. In a society that our youth, whether boys or girls, are purely taught to be selfish and to be singular and deal with themselves, egocentric, then we have a problem when you bring two people together that they are not prepared to fuse. That's a totally different issue. Are we claiming that the youth are mature enough at the age of 16, 17, 18 to go through, accept this responsibility? So I personally believe, rather than to come up with a prescription that says they should get married at this age or not, leave it to individual cases. If you find a case in which the prospective partners are mature enough and they understand their own responsibility, they want to make a commitment to go through it, and they have the support, the experience of the families around them that help them to succeed, why not? The younger they get married, the less likely that they would deviate and wander around. That has then negative consequences when it comes to permanent relationship. But under normal circumstance, I find it very difficult. I have kids coming to my class. I still call them kids at the age of 20, 22, 23. When it comes to experience of life and maturity, they are completely devoid of it.
What if we don't find the right person?
I think you should leave that question for, inshallah, the workshop that we try to organize on how to find the right partner.
What if you don't find the right partner?
There was a picture which I had it in my office in London because I was the family counselor at the Islamic Center. The picture, the image represented the skeleton of an old woman with long white hair. And there was a caption on top. It says, "I'm still waiting for the ideal husband." Aptly represented.
Gray, long hair, huh? So, Maulana, the right partner. This is a good question. I mean, what are you looking at right partner? I mean, what are you looking for? You want to answer that? If you're not finding the right partner.
I actually touched upon it a few nights ago when after going through the crisis, when I said the problem that we have is not the absence of literature that encourages both partners to create the right environment that is based on love, parity, respect, and mutual understanding, and ultimately creates the home that leads to tranquility. It's the egocentric nature of the individuals that go within this institution that leads to breaking it up. It's not. Then we have to ask ourselves, how do we go about selecting the right partner, and what kind of criteria do we use to select them?
But how many times have we found the right partner, but we never really got along with them? Isn't that?
It depends.
Normal?
Yeah, it depends. No. It depends on whether we believe that trial and error will ultimately lead us to the right partner, or no, the laws of probability from 0 to 1, we do all the researches, reduce the possibility of mistake, and then settle for that. Certainly the first one has failed, because most of the matchmaking organizations are full of men and women. They have gone through this experience before, and they have reached the age of 30, 35, only to find out they're still looking for the ideal partner. They want to go on a different route.
The main point behind this is that even if you find the right partner, you're not guaranteed success.
No.
You see, this is
that's the struggle within it.
Exactly.
That's the struggle within it.
It's about your attitude and her attitude. Reconciliation. I have a view on this personally. You know, I believe that you have a brother or a sister at home. You're raised by the same family, same parents. You do the same thing basically at home, but you always have problems. You always fight. You always argue. You never have the same mentality. How do you expect someone that comes from a totally different family, raised by a totally different environment, to get along with you?
جَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. But the point that I tried to explain to the brother, that under the current circumstance, where there are no huge amount of experience that they can access, I find it very difficult that the maturity, particularly the intellectual maturity, that is needed to make a commitment and respect this emotional bonding, it exists at the age of 16, 17 that we have, the youth that we have today. So my advice on this, the case is different. My advice would be not at this stage, or not in this context.
You're right. We do need a workshop.
Yes.
Does anyone want to comment on Dr. Kazarouni's topic? Suggestion?
Again, back to my daughter, which is here today in the audience. So she said to me today, she says, a question, and she says it doesn't make sense to me. So I said, I will tell Dr. Ibrahim tonight, so why don't we do a lecture one time where the youth comes out and tells you what things doesn't make sense to them. So then from that point, you can tackle what, fix things in their head about the religion. Not the other way around. So if nothing, you call it, if nothing is broken, don't fix it. But if it's broken, you want to fix it. So the best source to tell you what's broken is the youth themselves, and say, well, what about, praying 5 times? It doesn't make sense. For example, I'm just saying something. So from that end, you carry on your, I guess, advice or your discussion.
You see, brother, we have to address this question differently in 2 different contexts. Sometimes you organize a lecture for purely the youth and allow them to express their concern and the question they have. And then you address them in front of the youth only. Sometimes the youth is part of what we call a mixed audience, where now we have to approach literally to praise and take out of the youth the question that they have by opening a QAs like this. That you say, okay, we delivered a lecture. What questions do you have? First, questions that are relevant to the presentation, then any questions that you have. That was, I believe, the issue that Haj Kamal and I discussed, and plus others, that I should somehow come up with few topics for the first few nights, and then use the topics that come out of the conversation as a topic for conversation or the developing of the lectures as we go on. On one occasion, at least, the issue of family, we used it as a topic for the conversation for 2 nights. Now, if somebody, and last night I even mentioned this, that centers like this, during a month such as this one, could organize a number of workshops on aqaid. Why do we need God in a society that claims that God is dead? Why do we need God? Or what's this notion about prophethood and guidance? We have our intellect, we have our senses, we can do what we want. Or something of that these, what we call fundamental faith ideas, we can discuss them. We also can develop another workshop for those who believe and want to practice if they have issues to do with a'mal, salat, saum, hajj, zakat, relationship, etc., etc. What does the Sharia tell us about these? What are the parameters of my right and what are the parameters of my responsibility? These ideas, I floated them last night, that inshallah one day becomes the topic for workshop. But at least for the time being, when we have a QA, they can present these questions. And if we think it's an issue that everybody would benefit from it, I'll be more than happy to start researching it tonight until tomorrow and come up with a lecture for it.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Concerning the workshop, I think it's a very good idea, but is that something that you're planning to do, like only in Ramadan? Or are you planning to do that after Ramadan?
It's up to the board of directors. I'm more than happy to do it, either through lectures or workshop. But during the month of Ramadan, they have to decide whether there is enough people to come in, whether through registration, however it is. Then we can decide after Ramadan.
How are we going to broadcast emails?
How are we going to advertise it? We will advertise it through social media and So, but inshallah, I think there is a plan to do a workshop. Okay. I don't think we're going to wait.
Definitely for marriage, we desperately need.
We're not going to wait for the board to decide on this. So we already made a decision. We will go along with the workshop. The details will follow, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Doctor, you have been to many communities from your own experience. Can you tell us, some lessons we can learn from other Muslim community in how they approach and deal with the issues of the youth, or things that we can learn, and practice it here? Well, I've always been reminded by the wasiyah of Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alayhi wa to Imam Hassan, that says, the beginning of wasiyah, Allah fi nadm amrikum, get yourself organized. Using that as some kind of a framework to judge justice and to judge success or otherwise, I found that any society that has a clear-cut objective and program to reach it, they have succeeded. Remember the hadith again from Nahj al-Balagha, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alayhi complains about his disciples that are really have no power, in a sense they don't want to commit. He says, you filled my heart with pulse. I tell you to fight Muawiyah during winter, you say, oh, it's too cold, wait until summer. And when I tell you to fight Muawiyah during summer, it becomes too hot, wait until winter. I wish Muawiyah sends one of his disciples and take 10 of your people instead. For what purpose? اجتماعهم على باطلهم وتفرقكم عن حقكم. They have a clear plan and they are united to get it. Even if the goal is kufr, but still they get it. But you people, you are like a number of camels. I try to get your right side fixed, the left side goes out of control. I try to get your left side, the right goes. There is no clear plan, no clear organization, no clear understanding of the situation, no clear commitment. You have a leader like Amir al-Mu'mineen and you are not prepared to commit to his instructions. So where do we go? From my experience, I've worked with Jewish communities, with Christian communities, Muslim communities, Buddhist communities. I have gone to monasteries of Christians and others and lived with the monks. I have realized that if you have a clear plan, the goal is clear and the path to the goal is clearly identified, then you succeed. There is an expression in English, they say, a family that prays together stays together. Which literally can be said, when you have a plan in your life, the coherence is there, the bonding is there. But if you want to work on a day-by-day basis, there is no plan. The notion of success has to be redefined.
I know we're running out of time, but I want to hit on this topic of today's Supreme Court ruling. I don't know if you read it today. There's a media hype, social media hype. There's a number of people in our community that really are promoting the Supreme Court ruling. I want your opinion on this.
I think we need to look at this.
I don't know. Do we need to explain?
Well, I mean, I need another time to come back, but just since you asked for it, I just briefly respond. We fall into the trap of yes, no, yes, no. What we miss is, first of all these issues, they have political connotations to it. They have what we call human right connotation to it that has been redefined within it. And there is fundamentally the approach to understanding it. There are two schools of thoughts in academia that I believe exist in the narrative of religions as well. Is homosexuality a disease or a way of life that you choose to practice, or inherently is situated with your genes? Call it a deformity or a unique form of genes. These two ideas in academia they are debated. Any course on faith and human sexuality, they have to deal with these two ideas. Quran, when it comes to Qawm Lut,
clearly position itself that this is a habit that comes through practice. And if that's the case, once the habit is immoral, we reject it. In this view, we share it with at least the Catholics, not the Protestant movement, the Catholics within Christianity. But others claim that no, it's somehow to do with unique design right from the beginning. They have their own adherents. If you present it in an academic way, that there are two opinions, we believe in this, you believe in that. I believe in it and I condemn it according to my belief. Then ultimately come back to relativism, why not? The whole essence of a democratic society is to be able not to look for uniformity of opinion, but to respect diversity of opinion. This is something that we need to develop and talk. And the same thing with democracy. We fall into the trap. As soon as Palestinian-Israeli issue brought up, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and we fall into that trap. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And instead of turning the table, do democracies commit inherent human right violation or not? If we say yes, then we can condemn them even if they are the only source of democracy in the Middle East. So we have to really re-evaluate the way we deal with these kind of questions. We tend to be emotional and immediately try to condemn and say, no, develop. Remember what I said a couple of nights ago, that I said for any community you need two major issues, two components to exist for others to know who they are. Number one, to understand who they are, self-understanding, and number two, self-expression, the mode of language that you develop within the context that you live in. Whether it's democracy, whether it's homosexuality, whether it's lesbianism, whatever it is. Human right, there are ways of dealing with the concept without having to feel offensive to it or feel inferior. It's an opinion. You either accept or reject.
Do we accept?
Which one?
No.
Do we accept the Supreme Court ruling on today on equal rights for what they call it?
No.
Well,
civil union versus
remember,
regular marriage.
No, if we go to the history of Supreme Court in the United States has been the source of pain to a number of communities that we are not.
I understand. I mean, even the Supreme
But
Court, they legalized abortion, which is against our religion. I'm just trying to put this in the open because there's a lot of people out there that think that just because the Supreme Court said yes, then that makes it okay.
Well, let's say 9 people say yes, an opinion regarding an issue. Does that reflect?
It's a religious issue.
Yeah. They may look at it purely within what we call secular human right. I would look at it from a faith perspective. So my worldview is totally different from those.
Exactly. So we always need to look at it from a faith perspective.
Yeah. We have an epistemology which is different from theirs, and an ontology which is different from theirs. Based on these two, we can develop our own narrative that would condemn the decision of the the Supreme Court.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Inshallah.
Thank you very much.
I opened the topic now. Everybody wants to talk. أبو أشرف أي ساعة جايين هن؟
صار على الباب.
على الباب؟ معنا نص ساعة. على الباب بالعربي يعني معك نص ساعة.
Maulana, about this topic, homosexuality, if you go to the schools, especially high schools, you see how much confusion this is creating in the minds of our youth, and nobody's addressing this issue.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I need to add points. There is gay Arabic students in our schools, and nothing is being done about it.
Yeah, I've seen one in Star International. They chartered school. This boy, around 15 or 16, I don't think there is a girl that pays attention to her appearance as much as this boy does when he walks into the school. It's diabolical, but still, They claim that this is chartered school freedom and so on. The children have, remember, sister, I just said that there are three challenges, major challenges that the youth have to deal with. One of them is to navigate through the life that is happening around them. The second was to understand themselves. The third one, I will keep it because that's what's supposed to be the answer to the question. But we don't address these issues. We hide behind, or brush them under the carpet. I think the workshop will ultimately address these issues. Inshallah. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah. We're gonna maybe if we have time tomorrow, inshallah, we'll address more of this topic. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.